crush your enemies.
They drew first blood, not me.
See them driven before you.
Oh, my user.
And hear the lamentation of your women.
But I pity the fool.
Glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Phone home.
They're here.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in chronological order, overanalyzing what you've seen and spoiling what you haven't. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today we're discussing Basket Case, released April 2nd, 1982. It was written and directed by Frank Henenlotter and released by Analysis Film Releasing Corporation. Writer-director Frank Henenlotter and producer Edgar Ivins met through Henenlotter's horror shorts and eventually set their sights on a feature-length project together. Because horror has traditionally been the most forgiving genre for ultra-low-budget features, Henenlotter began writing Basket Case, though he prefers to characterize his films as exploitation rather than horror. Amusingly, Henenlotter started, as I often do, from a title and worked his way backward. Hitchcock's Psycho is regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time, and so Basket Case, a synonym for Psycho, was chosen as the title first. From there, Henenlotter wandered the streets of a pre-Giuliani Times Square, scribbling out ideas for the story on napkins from Nathan's Hot Dogs. The titular basket was taken quite literally when Henenlotter imagined a crazy man carrying a wicker basket around the city containing a sort of jack-in-the-box monster that would kill people. He quickly arrived at the obvious question asked by nearly every character in the film.
What's in the basket?
What's in the basket?
What's in the basket?
What's in the basket?
A phrase which was later adopted as the title of a documentary on the production of the eventual Basket Case trilogy.
Did you watch it?
It's only available on the trilogy Blu-ray, which I don't have. It's not available streaming anywhere, unfortunately. The film tells the story of a man named Duane who walks the streets of New York carrying a basket whose contents we'll describe later, and the premise was inspired loosely by Larry Cohen's It's Alive series. With each new draft of the script, Henenlotter leaned further and further into his comedy instincts, hoping to conjure a more enjoyable theatrical experience for the audience when he realized he couldn't make the serious movie that they couldn't afford to make. As a result, the first distributors they approached advised removing the bloodier scenes to create a blatant horror comedy, but Henenlotter insisted the blood made it funnier. And I agree. The film was shot on 16mm in the New York City area on a budget of $35,000, raised over the course of 6 years, shooting on and off for the last year.
Sorry, was the whole production 6 years?
No, they were only shooting for the last year of it, but they were still raising money while they were shooting.
Gotcha.
They would basically shoot a few weekends, edit a scene together, show it to new investors.
I would have given them money if they showed me some of those scenes.
What we watched was Arrow Video's lovely 4K Blu-ray restoration. The finished cut was slapped by the MPAA with an X rating, so they decided to release the film unrated on the Grindhouse circuit. As they had previously done with William Lustig's Maniac, the eventual distributor, Analysis Releasing Corporation, targeted midnight shows to grow a cult following for the film. It played to sold-out crowds for 18 months. When film critic Rex Reed called it the sickest movie ever made, Henenlotter had the quote plastered on a new run of posters for the film. Joe Bob Briggs has praised the film as an exploitation masterpiece, and in 2017, the film was selected by New York City's Museum of Modern Art for restoration and preservation. After confirming with their committee that they were thinking of the right film, Henenlotter provided them with the film's original 16mm print. He's like, "Are you sure you mean Basket Case?"
That's
They were like,
funny.
"Yes, we're reaching out to you on purpose." And he's like, "And you've seen Basket Case?" And they're like, "Yeah, we've seen it."
Honestly, it's like an art piece. It really is.
The film starts with a home at night in the quiet town of Glens Falls, New York. A man in a three-piece suit carrying a folder full of paperwork walks out the door and across his yard when he hears a sound from the shadows. He is, for some reason, spooked back into the house and locks the door behind him. He drops a medical bag and the folder of papers on his desk and moves to phone the Glen Falls Police Department. Unclear why he's so paranoid.
Yeah.
Because
he has no one else's.
Yeah, he doesn't have reason to be so suspicious of just the darkness in general yet. This house was actually located in the real town of Glens Falls, where producer Edgar Ivins grew up.
Glens Falls Police Department.
This is Dr. Lifflander. I want someone to...
He stops talking when he hears footsteps upstairs. We see a shadow on a wall reaching up to cut the phone line, and Lifflander's call cuts out. Lifflander runs around locking more doors and windows.
He's locking windows, but the windows are like 3 feet square.
Yeah.
And probably paper thin. It's just like, I don't think
this helps not at all.
Yeah, they're going to come in.
Downstairs, the Shadow cracks open a fuse box while Lifflander loads a gun at his desk. He panics when his lights flick off.
I've got a gun! I'll shoot! Get out or I'll shoot!
To prove he's a man of his word, he fires the full clip of the gun into a random shadow on the wall instead of waiting for an intruder. Once he's fully unloaded the gun into his own house, he leans back against the wall when a big deformed rubbery hand slaps over his face and pulls him out of frame. When he stands back up, his face has huge vertical gashes like claw marks, and he gurgles his own blood all over himself.
Yeah, the hand, like, do you remember Boglins?
Sure, yeah.
That's exactly what I feel like.
Something like that.
I feel like they were totally inspired from this movie.
For sure, probably. The same hand reaches up to pull him down again, only now it seems to be missing its middle finger for some reason. We cut to Times Square, and we see a man we'll come to know as Duane Bradley carrying a wicker basket past a row of adult theater marquees. He's followed as he walks by a man selling every drug known to man. He rattles off the full menu before angrily giving up on the unresponsive Duane.
I love the trope of the drug dealer or prostitute who's like trying to peddle their wares, but when they're not interested, instead of saying, oh, okay, maybe another time,
right.
they just get so mad, just like totally irate.
It's like asshole, like they're going to turn around and be like, all right, what's a little coke then? Sorry.
That's the aggressive sales pitch.
I feel terrible. I think we saw a few of these same theaters at the start of Nightmare, aka Nightmares and a Damaged Brain, when the lead psychopath of that film was first released from his asylum. I wrote down some of the more legible titles on the marquees, including Savage 5, a mid-70s martial arts film, The Great Smoky Roadblock, a 1977 comedy drama featuring Henry Fonda as a fugitive truck driver, and a kung fu triple feature of The Kung Fu Brothers, Tiger from Hong Kong, and Shanghai Connection, most of which are available to watch in full on a great Hong Kong martial arts YouTube channel called The Wu-Tang Collection. Highly recommend. Good quality, too. Duane eventually comes to a sign for the Hotel Broslin and heads inside. The manager at checkout looks like the love child of David Crosby and Bob Hoskins. He chats with a few old-timers about an acquaintance from the neighborhood named Dirty Lou, who evidently committed suicide by cab.
He hailed a cab. When it pulled up to the curb, he jumped in front of us. Get out of here, you're full of crap.
Despite a special thanks in the credits to the hotel staff, there is no Hotel Broslin. And the office where we see the manager sitting is actually a propped open freight elevator. They held the doors open and put tarps up to cover the walls.
Well, that's clever of them, but there is no hotel at all? Like it's just a building? Is that what we're saying?
Correct, yeah.
So why did we thank people?
As a joke.
Okay.
Also, half the names in the credits are not real people either.
Really?
They just wanted to fill the credits with names.
That's hilarious.
Duane asks for a room for the next few days, and the old-timer winos poke fun at him.
You by yourself?
Yes, alone, by myself.
All alone in this cold, cruel world.
The manager gets to ask for the first of many times in the film.
What's in the basket?
He pays up front with a wad of cash, and the closest wino, O'Donovan, is very impressed by the money.
Did you see that?
He's loaded.
So are you.
I liked that line a lot.
Henenlotter has said this cash is literally the entirety of the film's budget at the time, and it was included on screen. Yeah, it was included on screen because, in his experience, audiences for some reason tended to applaud when they saw large sums of cash on screen. So it was just like an applause sign, basically. Duane carries his heavy basket up the stairs and crosses paths with a crazy woman named Josephine. She takes his arm and walks him to his room, number 7, while sharing the bizarre history of that particular apartment. Apparently, a rich woman had lived there hiding out from her family for years. The second she seems to have finished the story, she stops walking with him and returns to her post at the bottom of the stairs, even though later we'll see she lives past his door on the same floor. Mm-hmm. This is like the 12th take, and she's like, all right, back to the bottom of the stairs so we can get one more take.
Back to one.
They're like, nah, we're just going to use that one.
Just outside his room, Duane spots an apparent prostitute named Casey leading an older male client into her room. She smiles and winks at Duane as she follows the John inside. In his room, Duane opens a window and leans down to speak with the basket he brought with him.
We're here.
Later, he consults the manager about a place to eat, and the gang of winos suggest a burger place across the street. He returns with food and unlocks the basket to drop a few cooked meat patties into it, and something inside loudly gobbles them down.
Take your time, there's plenty.
Duane pulls out the file folder Lifflander was carrying around, still stained with a splash of the man's blood, suggesting Duane here likely had a hand in the man's death. He reads through the papers inside and eventually finds a page with the signatures of Doctors Needleman and Kutter. Needleman and Kutter. Doctors. Do you guys recall the last Kutter we saw?
Cutter's Way?
It It was more recent than Cutter's Way.
Damn it.
Is it Toe Cutter?
Nope. That Cutter's Way was more recent than Toe Cutter.
Oh, okay.
I feel like you asked us this in that movie, too.
I did,
Yeah,
and you
you
guys
did.
brought up both of those examples.
I remember that. What movie was that?
This season, post-apocalyptic, played by Sid Haig.
Battle Truck. Oh, Sid Haig.
I remember the movie, but I can't think of the title.
The Aftermath.
Aftermath.
Which actually Kutter is kind of a nickname he carries over into the zombie verse because Captain Spaulding was a.k.a. Kutter in Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses.
It's like those movies are definitely not.
No, but I think it's an intentional reference because they're both Sid Haig.
Yeah.
Duane tries to look the doctors up, but Kutter isn't in the phone book, so he starts with Needleman. That night, Duane is awoken by the pacing of his unseen roommate. He has a one-sided argument with the roommate who never actually says a word in the scene.
Look, I'm not going to stay up half the night talking. It's 3:30 in the morning. Go back to sleep. I'm not going to debate this. Now, good night.
The next morning, we see one of the winos from downstairs sneaking around outside Duane's room. Casey across the hall catches him with his ear to the door and calls him out.
Last week you were in the dumbwaiter. This week it's keyholes.
Shh! There's somebody in there.
Well, I figured that.
You should see, he's got a roll of bills in him.
Casey scares the man off and returns to knock on Duane's door and warn him about their snooping neighbor.
You know, peeking through the keyhole and shit. So if you got anything of value in there, like money or something, I wouldn't leave it laying around.
Then, she weirdly wanders right into the room to look around herself and suggests they grab a drink sometime. It's like, this is a pretty impressive room. You got a basket and all the shit that was in here yesterday. Weirdly, a man wanders up behind her in the doorway and pauses for a moment before shuffling on down the hall without ever entering the scene. And we'll see this guy a few more times. He just sort of wanders by.
Well, what's interesting is that I guess they're not guests, but they're like tenants.
Yeah, there's kind of people that just infest the building. They don't even live there. They just kind of wander around it at all times.
Yeah, and everyone is actually like very neighborly with the exception of like a few like bad eggs, but like everyone's like really worried about what's going on.
I think they're also a bunch of like gossipy looky-loos too, because anytime anyone does anything, 90 people show up immediately. After Casey leaves, Duane tells the basket it's time to visit Dr. Needleman. In Needleman's waiting room, a patient voices a complaint that for the second time she's been prescribed a medication that she's allergic to. The girl checking patients in is sympathetic to the issue, but otherwise unhelpful, and the angry woman leaves. The receptionist is wearing a very obvious wig because actress Terri Susan Smith was in a punk band at the time and had a fully shaved head, though I couldn't find an explanation for the wigs worn by nearly every other woman in the film. Smith's band was called the Tattooed Vegetables, and they served as an opening act for the Dead Kennedys in the early 80s. She's also an artist now. You can find a bunch of her stuff at ahusmith.com. Very cool art, actually. She's still working. She has an Instagram and everything.
Oh, interesting.
ahusmith.com.
Gonna look it up.
When Duane steps up to the window, the girl who will eventually come to know as Sharon, although I'm not sure she ever says her name in the film.
Yeah, I don't know.
She points to a faulty electric typewriter and emulates some of its weirder sounds to illustrate the technical difficulties she's experiencing.
Yesterday it was squeaking, like if a mouse was caught inside. Real high-pitched, like...
I don't know anything about typewriters.
Duane is confused why she's telling him this and explains he's here to see Needleman. Apparently she saw the basket and assumed it was a toolbox and Duane was the typewriter repairman she's been expecting. Duane claims to be a family friend here to surprise Needleman, and Sharon agrees to fake an appointment with Needleman for Duane since the doctor refuses to see anybody without one.
What's in the basket? Easter eggs?
Duane doesn't answer her question. She seems offended to learn of all the local tourist traps Duane hasn't made time for, but then flirtatiously offers to be his tour guide.
Yeah, she gets super upset. It's like, you don't have time? Did you make time for those?
Well, what about Radio City Music Hall? Or the UN? Had time for them?
I was like, okay, she's really angry. But then she's like, oh, but maybe we could go together. Like, but she has this energy throughout the whole movie.
Where she's vacillating between like angry and then just like flirty. Duane is sent into Needleman's office and complains of chest pain. The doctor invites him to put the basket down and step into a room beside his desk. The man is disturbed when he sees Duane has a long, ugly scar all the way down the right side of his torso. Later, we see Duane sneaking out of the place.
Was he surprised?
Oh, yeah. Very.
Sharon asks Duane if he can be here at 7 p.m. when she gets off work. He politely lets her down, and then, places the basket in the corner of the room, and tiptoes back to her to quietly get her number and address.
Why are we whispering?
I don't want him to hear.
Who? The doctor?
Back in Needleman's office, the man is surprisingly still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sweating behind his desk. I was sure that the surprise comment meant he was dead. The man taps a pen against his desk neurotically and then fumbles through a stack of notes for contact info on Dr. Lifflander. He starts dialing out the number, and we cut to a kung fu fight in progress. This is actually a clip from the 1973 film The Bodyguard, starring Sonny Chiba. I was only able to confirm that because I found the trailer, and all these shots are in the trailer. He might actually be watching the trailer. The dubbing in some of the footage is literally Kung Pao Enter the Fist level comedically bad. Duane is watching the film in one of those Times Square theaters, but tired from his roommate keeping him up all night. Another movie patron looks very curious about the basket in the seat beside him. He waits for Duane to pass out in his chair to steal the basket and run back to the men's room with it, where he stomps the lock off and kicks it into a urinal. Seconds later, Duane wakes and realizes the basket is gone. In a POV from inside the basket, the thief screams at whatever he finds inside, and Duane races past the bloodied, escaping victim on his way to the basket on the bathroom floor.
Not now. Not yet. Save it. Save it.
That night, Needleman is still working in his office and finds the number for Dr. Kutter. We jump to Dr. Cutter's home, where she's pressuring her date to enjoy yet another glass of wine with her, and he is reluctant.
Listen, if I have any more, I'm liable to...
That's all right. I like you drunk. You're cute when you slobber.
Her flirtations are interrupted with the phone ringing.
Shit.
The actress playing Dr. Kutter, Diana Browne, is also in a large brunette wig, which accentuates her already prominent Sigourney Weaver vibes.
Yeah. I thought she was having dinner with Duane.
Oh, really?
And I was super confused by what was happening.
That would mix me up a lot.
Because
Jack literally was in the room with me when I was watching the scene. He's like, wait, that's the guy that with the basket, right? I'm like, no, this is a different guy. He's like, oh, okay. I thought that was weird.
Yeah. So I'm glad I'm on the same level as Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then because there's no reason
for her to be on a date here.
Well, no, for her, the dramatic reveal of, yes, this is Dr. Kutter.
Right.
It's like, oh, he doesn't know that he's with her. Right. And I thought who this woman was. I thought who this woman was the crazy woman from the stairs.
Oh, the Josephine.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, that's the big twist, is that this is Dr. Kutter, and he doesn't even know it.
So you thought both of these people were characters you'd seen before, and it
Yes.
turned out neither of them were.
Yes.
Neither of them were.
Perfect.
That's hilarious.
She's also, not only is she in like Sigourney Weaver mode, she sounds like her, she looks like her, but she's even acting like a zooled out Sigourney Weaver a little bit. She starts the phone call by reminding Needleman that she had previously insisted on going no contact. Needleman says it's important. He's been trying to reach Dr. Lifflander and getting no response. Then, he mentions he was just visited by a young man using a fake name with a scar down the right side of his body.
Please, Harold, I'm in the middle of dinner.
What he said about Lifflander. I've been trying to get him and I get no answer. And this kid says it's because Lifflander is dead. Murdered. Cut in half.
I don't think we saw Lifflander actually cut in half, but it makes sense symbolically once we get to some of the backstory.
And other kills.
Right. Dr. Kutter briefs Needleman on his official alibi moving forward.
Neither of us know any Dr. Lifflander, and neither of us have ever been in Glens Falls, but one of us wants to get back to her dinner. Good night.
Even though we signed some medical paperwork in that city when we performed a surgery, apparently. She hangs up and returns to her date. Downstairs from Needleman's office, we see Duane arrive carrying his basket. He hides in the shadows outside the reception area, while Sharon packs her things to leave. Needleman will work late alone. Duane sneaks into the office and dumps his basket on the floor, reminding the unseen contents to bring back Needleman's address book. Needleman hears a clattering outside, and when he walks to the reception area, he sees a door smashed off its hinges. He uses his desk to barricade himself in his office, but he pulls what I call a Lebowski, because the door actually opens away from the desk, so he's not blocking anything with it. When he hears a low, heavy breathing sound around a corner, he flicks on the light in another room and finds a fleshy mutant character hanging impossibly on the office wall. The character kind of looks like Mount Rushmore if it only had one face, but with two stubby arms, and apparently the grip of Spider-Man to support its weight holding onto this flat wall. Needleman screams and the creature leaps from the wall to maul him to death. We cut to Duane waiting downstairs for the creature to return to its basket, and then up to Needleman's office, where we see the bloody aftermath. The man lying on the floor in two halves, the same way Lifflander was reportedly killed.
Jack would close his eyes during some of these more bloody parts, but he opened them right as the camera was panning off of this because I'm like, oh, it's over. And then they showed the
Legs.
body and then they showed the legs. He's like, who's the other guy that got killed? I'm like, no, it's the same guy.
Same guy. That's funny.
Same guy, man. What same guy? Same guy, man.
Duane loads the creature into his basket and they return home together.
But I also like that he brought the Rolodex.
Right, yeah. No, he remembered.
He's like, oh, good job.
The next morning, Duane arrives to the apartment they share carrying a cardboard box and informs his roommate that he has to do some reconnaissance on Dr. Kutter's office by himself today. To keep the roommate entertained, he's brought home a small tube television. He props it up on the dresser beside the basket and clicks it on without looking at the screen to see the picture is scrambled. As soon as Duane is gone, the creature's melty hand reaches out of the basket and makes a crude attempt to change the channel, but tears the dial off the TV. Obviously, he should have started by adjusting the V-hold and H-hold using the wheels at the bottom of the control panel, but apparently he doesn't know how to use an old-fashioned television.
You had to Google that, right?
Oh, I used to have one of these TVs.
I used to have a TV like
We had
this.
to do this all the time.
The first TV in our kind of kids' room was it had the VHF and UHF dials.
Yeah. I remember we had a TV like that, and it had the big dials on the side, and it had the rabbit ears on it. But I don't remember knowing how to use it to the extent of dialing in a channel.
There were little smaller wheels.
Yeah, no, I remember
on the bottom.
there were tiny buttons or turning guys at the bottom.
You would twist them, and it would slow the strobing of the picture from left to right. We cut to Duane running full speed through the neighborhood to the address Sharon gave him. And then we cut to the two of them on Liberty Island, just below the statue. Do you guys recall the last film we saw to shoot a single scene on Liberty Island?
It was the John Travolta one.
No.
No, not John Travolta. Are we sure it's not the Blowout?
It's not Blowout. Escape from New York, which was actually the first film to shoot on the island at all with a permit. But it's literally one shot at the very beginning of the movie. They pan down from the Statue of Liberty, and then as the camera's moving past a bus, they switch to another take, so that it looks like it's all in one piece.
Right.
And then we're in LA River for the stage of the prison when Snake is getting processed. Duane and Sharon confess to each other that they only agreed to this sightseeing adventure as an excuse to see each other again, and suddenly they're making out. Back in the apartment, Duane's roommate displays either a psychic connection to Duane or extreme frustration at his inability to operate a television. We'll learn later that it's the former. He and Duane are connected, and so he senses Duane's arousal, and it triggers him to go crazy back home. He throws the TV on the floor and then tosses a lamp at the fallen television to shatter its screen. Other residents of the building are drawn toward the commotion by his screams. Now we're treated to a short stop-motion sequence as the creature crawls around the room, throwing furniture and demolishing the apartment.
This is so great.
It's really fun.
It's my favorite shot of the film, I think. It reminded me so much of, are you familiar with Jan Svankmajer?
No.
The Czech stop motion?
Yeah. So, he's from the
Czechoslovakia
at the time. But you may be familiar with, he did a film, like a stop motion film called Alice. And it was based on Alice in Wonderland and with a lot of stop motion in it.
He uses a lot of real
creepy
animal corpses, but with armature so that he's moving these taxidermied animals around.
Yeah. But he also did this series of shorts, I want to say throughout the 80s, it might have even been in the 70s, where he did claymation, and it was body parts, so it'd be heads and hands and feet, and they were oftentimes inside miniature room sets. The heads would be the same size as an entire room, and they'd stretch open their mouths, or the feet would smash into the face, and just the way that this creature is moving here reminded me so much of his shorts. And I just think that at first I was like, oh, whoever did this was probably inspired by that, and I realized that they were just contemporaries at the time. So.
Yeah, and I do think that this was not done out of experience. It was just a cost-effective way to communicate this without having to build some kind of an animatronic for the character.
For sure. But it reminded me of those art pieces. It's so great.
I've read reviews that described it as Gumby on acid.
See, I was gonna say, to me, Gumby was the first thing that came to me.
It's actually a very low frame rate animation.
Yeah, and
it's sub Rankin Bass,
and it's very slidey.
And we see him yank a drawer out of a dresser, and then he throws it back at the camera, and then we cut to an actual drawer just exploding against the wall in the room, which is fun. I like the change of perspective within the scene.
Yeah.
We see the creature's mutated hands digging through Duane's backpack for the bloody folder, and he hurls a whole stack of pages at the wall and a framed music sheet of Irving Berlin's song Along Came Ruth, which is actually weirdly fitting when we start describing the plots of the second and third installments. The neighbors complain to the building manager that they can't get any sleep, even though this is happening in the middle of the day. We were just at Liberty Island a second ago, and we know this is happening at the same time.
They work the night shifts.
Oh, okay,
They're night people.
Night people. What was that the original title for? You remember? Anybody?
Night people?
Night people.
I have no idea.
It makes no sense as a title for this film.
Green Ice?
It was a reference to the fact that Gene Hackman's character worked the graveyard shift.
Oh, Night Moves? No.
Nope. It's not that one.
Yeah.
A different Gene
Hackman night movie.
Is it the one where he's like making the mirror?
The Doppler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, what was that movie called?
That's right.
Oh, wait, hold on. I almost got it.
Oh,
Shit, I almost got it. Because it's about the custody of the kid, and it's something like that, right? Something to do with custody?
No kid custody.
All right, I don't got it then.
All Night Long.
Oh.
It's him and Barbara Streisand. Very weird movie.
Oh, I think that's the one I was thinking of when I said Night Moves.
Well,
What is Night
there's
Moves?
another Gene Hackman movie.
Oh, Jesus.
That's called Night Moves. That was a Patreon pick.
Oh.
And that's the one where he finds out that his wife is cheating on him.
Okay. No wonder I got those confused.
Yeah. Gene Hackman night movies. In the room, the creature is shaking the bed, but a crowd of neighbors close in on the door and he jumps back into the basket to hide before the manager pushes his way in. Many of the neighbors follow him in too, but the room looks empty now. O'Donovan, as he's credited, or Donovan, as he's sometimes referred to, is distracted by a wad of cash just lying there on the floor. Do you guys recall the last time we had a film with a Donovan? Very recently. Previous film.
You expect me to remember an entire film ago?
Yeah.
So a little sex?
That's right. Tim Matheson's character was Michael Donovan.
Wow, I did not remember his name at all.
Nobody says it, I think, in the whole movie,
Well,
maybe.
how am I supposed to know that then?
Credits. When the manager decides there's nobody here, he has to corral all the neighbors back out into the hall. When the hall is fully cleared, Donovan returns, or O'Donovan returns, to pick the lock and steal the wad of cash on the apartment floor. He's counting it out in his hand when he spots the basket on the dresser and assumes there may be more valuables inside. He can't resist the temptation to check, and of course unleashes the creature, which promptly latches onto his face with its hands and teeth. The neighbors are again called to action by the screams, and O'Donovan manages to stumble back to his own room before the creature finally kills him. Back at Liberty Island, it's Duane's turn to react psychically to the creature's emotions. He rushes back to Hotel Broslin fearing the worst. The manager and neighbors are the first to find O'Donovan's corpse, slashed to hell against a wall coated in blood, and bloody tracks along the floor lead to an open window. Hanging on the wall inside O'Donovan's apartment is a nude poster of Mary and Madeline Collinson, Playboy's first twin playmates.
Lovely. I think I got really spatially confused in this scene because I'm just like, I thought he went back into the same room and then suddenly he's in his own room.
I think he just wanted to die in his own room. So he walked backwards.
But then the
into
door,
it while someone was eating his face.
But then the door to Duane's room is closed.
So he kills O'Donovan in his own room. And that's when everyone stumbles in and they see bloody tracks leading to the window. So whatever killed O'Donovan climbed out the window, climbed back in another window. In the hall, we see the door to Duane's room, number 7, pushed shut from inside. In the lobby later, Duane arrives in a frenzy, asking what happened, and the manager explains that O'Donovan was killed and the cops just took his body away. Duane turns back to Sharon and orders her to leave so she isn't the next victim of this violence, which he has clearly already pinned on his roommate.
You heard what they said? He killed O'Donovan! No! I don't want him killing you!
She's reluctant to go, but he shoves her away hard and flies up the stairs to his room. On his way, he passes a detective taking statements from his neighbors, and the detective follows the suspicious man up to room 7. The cop asks permission to enter and question Duane, even though he hasn't been here all day. He asks Duane to explain the ruckus his neighbors described hearing from his room. When Duane plays dumb, the detective follows the man's stare to the top of the dresser.
What's in the basket?
When he flicks it open, it's empty. The detective notices the money on the floor, and luckily, even though his roommate left clear bloody handprints the whole way to the window, he also managed not to track any blood in through the window.
The track doesn't lead directly back into another window. The second he got outside, he's like, gotta wash up a little.
When the cop finally leaves, Duane's roommate emerges from his hiding place, raising one hand out of their toilet. Duane confesses to going on a date in secret, and the creature psychically expresses his feelings of betrayal.
I'm not deserting you. I just wanted some time for myself. Look,
I've helped you with everything so far, haven't I? Killing Lifflander was your idea. Coming to New York to get the other two was your idea.
Duane lovingly lifts his roommate from the toilet seat and gently towels off the toilet water. He promises they'll always be together and he would never desert the creature. Now we cut to a crowded bar as Duane's neighbor Casey walks around saying hi to everybody. If this bar looks familiar, it's because it's the Hellfire Club, which we saw last in William Friedkin's Cruising. It's an actual S&M club where they shot this scene, but it's the same bar. Casey spots Duane nursing a drink with his basket up on the bar. She strikes up a conversation and is amused to find him intoxicated for the first time. He shares with her that he met a girl and he's worried he messed it up.
Tell you what, why don't you and that picnic basket of yours join me at the back table? I've got some heavy boozing to do, and looks like you can use some good company. Come on.
Later, they're laughing hard with each other, and eventually it's her turn to ask the fateful question, but he finally answers it.
What's in the basket?
My brother.
Your brother! What is he, a midget?
No, we're twins. Siamese twins.
That's funny. You don't look oriental. So what happened? Somebody shrink him?
No, he's deformed. A freak. He looks like a squashed octopus.
Her laughter subsides, but now that Duane has unveiled the secret, he can't stop himself. He explains their mother died in childbirth, and they were hidden away from the world. Their aunt was the only person who loved them. He also mentions his brother's ability to speak with him psychically, but explains that he responds out loud because he lost the ability to send messages back when they were surgically separated.
But since they've been separated, I can't do it anymore, but he can still do it to me. In fact, he's even better at it now. He always knows what I'm thinking.
Duane, you're giving me the creeps.
Unless his twin has taken over speaking right here, Duane seems to accidentally refer to his brother by his own name on the way to delivering their full backstory.
Oh, if you only knew what it was like. Duane and I kept hidden from everyone. We're both of us so messed up. I don't know which one of us is worse.
Duane? Duane.
We fade to the living room of the Glens Falls home, where Dad stands beside a crib and refuses to raise Duane's twin as a son. He asks the family obstetrician, Dr. Lifflander, why he didn't kill the deformed twin before it killed his wife. Right away, their aunt tries to comfort the twins, and sometime later, she consults a social worker to evaluate her education of the boys, but the woman is horrified and suffers a panic attack at the sight of them. A young Duane, 12 years old, stands with a button-up shirt torn open down the right side for his twin brother's face and arms to hang out. One night, while their aunt is away, the twins hear their father arguing with doctors that they need to separate Duane from his twin tonight. The doctors warn him that the deformed twin will very likely die if they separate the boys, but that's exactly what he wants. For some reason, every doctor he's consulted refused to perform the surgery, so Lifflander was asked to bring in doctors Kutter and Needleman to work off the record. But Dr. Kutter explains that the boys don't share organs or bones, and I think the standard operating procedure would have been to separate them at birth.
Yeah.
We never delve any further into why doctors have refused to for 12 years now. I thought for 1982 it was actually progressive that Dr. Kutter turns out to be a woman, until later when we find out what her doctorate is actually in. As much as the father is the bad guy here, what he's suggesting is probably the ethically correct move, especially considering the brothers, as we've seen them, can survive apart, and the deformed twin is actually afforded significant agency and mobility by having been separated from his brother. Lifflander is still concerned for the twin, but Dr. Kutter sides with Dad.
And the other one?
Doctor, I'm not even sure it's human.
Duane and his brother are wrestled into an impromptu OR in the family's dining room, where Needleman provides needles and Kutter provides cutting.
I think it's funny to the extent to which they do some things in what looks like a medically correct way and then completely ignore it for others. So like she's wearing a mask but no covering on her hair, but the other doctor's wearing coverings on his hair, but then half of them are just in street clothes trying to hold this kid down.
Well, maybe her wig is actually a permanent...
a hairnet.
Yeah, that's actually holding down her really dirty hair to keep the OR safe. Oh, are they?
Oh, are they?
It's funny, I spent way too much time trying to figure out what Lifflander could possibly mean. And then in some interview, he explained that Lifflander was from a draft of the script where it was a serious movie. And then when he started making jokes, he was like, Kutter, Needleman, who cares? The operation itself is surprisingly well done for an entirely practical effect, and it's even nauseating at times, but the twins are safely separated. The Foley here sounds like duct tape being pulled off a roll as the brothers are finally pulled apart. Duane awakes in his bedroom later to find his brother missing, and for the first time, we get a name for the smaller twin.
Is that you, Belial? Where? I'm coming.
Belial being the Hebrew word for worthless, and so hopefully named by his father, but in the Christian Bible the word is also occasionally used as a personification of evil, or the devil specifically.
Well, I just think it's interesting that the father would name it at all and then pick a name that was just so terrible.
It seems out of character because the whole time he's been saying Duane and that thing, that monster. Like, so he didn't pick the name. Did the aunt name the kid evil worthless?
That's what I was trying to figure out.
That's weird.
Who gave them this name? And then everyone else just sort of accepted
Unless he
it.
just picked it on his own out of the Bible. Apparently, Duane is receiving a psychic message from his discarded twin, and he follows the voice in his head to a hefty bag beside the trash cans outside. Belial pokes his hand through the bag and reaches out for his brother.
I like that he just threw it in the trash.
Yeah.
Like, not even like
I think they expected it to die in the surgery, but then they were like, oh, it didn't. Whatever.
But like, you know, don't take it out to the water or tie a brick around it or something like that.
Just leave it in the garbage, like that bag of fat from Fight Club. Sometime later, their father awakens to construction sounds in the home. He wanders groggily into the basement and eventually hurts himself by stepping barefoot on a nail, but not like a vertical one. It's just laying on the ground. He starts to find sawdust and tools in a trail across the room, and suddenly, an enormous buzzsaw is activated, with an assortment of pitchforks and spikes welded all around it. The machine suddenly lurches forward and slides down an incline until the blade buries itself in the father's chest, and we get an insert of the man's bloodied feet on the floor, and then the legs tip over to opposite sides, suggesting the father has been vertically bisected fully in half. The same fate which we have seen later befall Doctors Lifflander and Needleman, as a fatal metaphor for the separation of Duane and Belial. Sometime later, the aunt of the twins climbs up into the attic and assures them the police have closed the case on their father's murder and they're free to come out now. They're like, the police don't know who did it and what they did it with. And it's like, where did you put that giant remote control buzzsaw that we built?
Well, it seems like the aunt probably cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah, she must have. But then I would suspect her of having done this. Their aunt also mentions that on paper, Belial has been declared dead by Dr. Lifflander, blaming a surgical complication to avoid murder charges for abandoning the living twin in a trash bag. Their aunt reads them a passage from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and specifically the words of the enslaved half-monster Caliban, describing his tranquil island home. Do you guys recall the last character we saw that was inspired by Shakespeare's Caliban? His name sounded like Caliban.
Bob Balaban?
No. From Altered States? No, not that.
Harry Callahan?
No. The character's name was Calibos.
Oh, was it Clash of the Titans?
Yep.
Yeah, one of the antagonists of Clash of the Titans, Calibos, was not based on any existing mythological character, but on Shakespeare's Caliban for some reason. We jump right to their aunt's funeral, and then back to the Hotel Broslin in the present, where Casey is helping Duane up the stairs to his room. She has to drag him inside and walk him to the bed, where he immediately passes out. But he randomly sits upright and collects the basket from the hall as if in a trance before laying back down.
Almost forgot him.
Casey's curiosity gets the better of her, but when she opens the basket, it's empty again, seeming to confirm her theory that Duane was either fucking with her or he's batshit crazy. She crosses the hall to her own room and changes into a thin shirt as pajamas and removes her panties before laying down to sleep. The camera slowly pushes in on her when suddenly a melty hand emerges from behind her pillows. Her actual pillows.
Those aren't pillows.
It reaches out to stroke one of her pillows. Her breasts, I mean. When she finally sees him, Casey lets out a blood-curdling scream and jumps out into the hallway. Soon, all the neighbors fill the hall again, and the manager goes inside to investigate her claims of an intruder. Again, all he finds inside is an open window, and he urges everyone back to their rooms. Neighbor Josephine invites Casey into her own room off the same hall. Back in room 7, we see Belial lowering the lid on his basket, and then inside, he plays with Casey's panties, which he evidently stole from her room. The next morning, Duane rises, tightly gripping his head from the hangover, and slaps at Belial's basket to wake him for the final kill of their revenge plot. They walk to the offices of Dr. Kutter, veterinarian.
She's a vet, an animal doctor.
In the reception area, a dog sniffs curiously at Duane's basket until he's called into Dr. Cutter's office by a pair of twin nurses. Evidently, he's using another fake name.
Mr. Wade?
These twin nurses are actually identical twin cousins of director Henenlotter, and one of them had broken their arm shortly before filming. So to maintain the twin symmetry, they're both wearing casts on the same arm, which obviously makes no sense, but I love it. I love the implication that these twins are so the same that they broke their arm in the same place.
Yeah, and I would have had them break
Opposite arms?
Opposite.
Yeah, but they have them both on their right arms. Apparently, Duane made the appointment claiming to have a cat with a bad wound.
Tell me about your cat. You said on the phone he's badly cut.
Yes, on his side.
Okay, let's take him into the next room.
When Duane confesses he has no cat, and that the patient he's brought today was actually wounded by a Dr. Lifflander, Kutter realizes exactly who the man is, but still has no idea what he's brought to the appointment. She calls him out in her best Sigourney Weaver impression of the film.
Ah, yes, I see. I'm beginning to understand now. You're that kid Needleman warned me about, the Bradley boy, the freak we separated. What a pleasant surprise after all these years. You seem to have gone to a great deal of trouble to find me. The question is why?
She sarcastically guesses he's here to thank her, and finally gets around to the famous question.
What's in the basket?
When she flips it open, Belial leaps out to attack her, and after a long, screamy struggle, he shoves her face down into a drawer full of scalpels.
It's like everybody's junk drawer in
Yeah.
their kitchen,
Just
just
toss
full
a
of
scalpel
like
in there.
random
Yeah, you just scalpels.
implements.
Perfect.
No like caps or safety devices on them or anything.
There's a few paper clips in there too. No, it's all like tongs and scalpels. That's all they have in there, scissors.
That's all you need when you're a vet.
Really?
I mean...
Her twin nurses are concerned by all the screaming, but not concerned enough.
Right.
And lazily meander into the office. When Kutter rises from the scalpel drawer, 5 scalpels hang from her face by their impaled blades.
This shot is so long.
It's a 15-second scream. I counted it out.
It's so funny. Like, I get it. They went to all this work to make this effect, this makeup look like this, but like, it just seems so long. She sits there and screams.
And her face is so perfectly crazy, too. I love it. Duane runs with his basket back out onto the street. Just as he carries Belial up the stairs to his room, Sharon finds him there and shares that Dr. Needleman's been killed, and she doesn't know who to turn to for comfort.
I need to be with someone. I don't want to be alone.
She follows him into the room, and they kiss some more, but Belial drags his no feet, freaking out about it this time. Duane gropes her breasts in bed, and Belial waits for an explicit invitation from Sharon before bothering to cockblock his twin.
Take me, Duane.
Oh my God, what's that? Duane, let me out. Let me out.
She's not at all terrified enough of the screaming, but Duane seems paralyzed by this interruption and can't let go of her. Eventually, he escapes his trance, wraps Sharon in a bedsheet, and then shoves her so hard out the door that she seems to bounce off the opposite wall and just fall out of frame.
I thought he was intentionally holding her down so she couldn't sit up and see Belial.
That's what I thought.
Maybe that is what's happening.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It just looks very strange, though.
Yeah.
He slams the door to keep her out, and back in the room, he shouts at Belial for ruining his only chance at happiness. He demands to know what Belial expects of him, and Sharon begs to be let back in for some reason. Just go. Cut your losses here. Duane collapses in tears, hopeless, and eventually Sharon gives up waiting and leaves. That night, in Belial POV, we see him open the basket to find Duane sleeping across the room. We get another quick stop-motion sequence of Belial hopping out of the basket and cracking his knuckles on the floor. He stares at the sleeping Duane for a moment, and his eyes literally glow with a blinking orange light from inside his head, which according to my Pixel earbuds means he's actively charging. Belial hops up into the open window frame and screams raggedly into the night. We see Duane in bed tossing and turning in the grips of a nightmare, and then, inside his dream, we see Duane running naked through the streets of New York, until he's standing outside Sharon's building, looking up at another open window. In a POV, someone moves through Sharon's apartment, up next to her as she sleeps. Duane's arm reaches out to pet her face and then stroke her leg before pulling away the bedsheet concealing her full nudity. His hand reaches out to boop her right tit and then grope it, and amazingly she sleeps through all of this. The POV then positions itself on top of her and starts rhythmically sliding back and forth to imply Duane is raping her in her sleep. But now, we cut back to sweaty Duane, still in his own bed. Suddenly, his eyes snap open, and he realizes that the dream was a projection of Belial's actions, and he must be out there right now, raping Sharon in her bed. An early draft of the script actually called for this whole dream to be played out with Belial running through the streets at night and assaulting Sharon in her sleep, but it would have been too expensive and too difficult to animate the whole trip down the road. So last minute, they wrote up a scene of Duane acting out the same motions to illustrate what was happening with Belial, but interpreted as a dream by his brother.
And just run naked down the street.
Yeah, because Belial's naked. So the point is, he's experiencing everything Belial is.
He should have just been grinding his junk across the ground as he was crawling.
No.
Oh my God, that's terrible. They didn't obviously have permits to do any of this. So they had vans set up on opposite sides of the street, and he would run out of one van past the camera into the next van. And he's walking with a limp here because he had injured himself in like a motorcycle accident. So, but he had them like sweep the ground so that he wouldn't accidentally step on anything on the naked run.
I'm glad, but also they didn't have permits to do this, so it was just a naked dude running through the streets that they filmed.
Yep.
And they're like, quick, okay, let's go to the next street over because, you know, they're going to call the cops on this street.
Well, there were the problem was there were 4 other naked guys in the shot, so they had to move down one block. Back in Sharon's apartment, she finally wakes up, and we confirm outside the dream world now that Belial is there raping her with still glowing eyes. When she screams, his melty hands reach up to silence her, eventually choking her to death. Though they're grasping so lazily at her neck that I wasn't even sure that was what happened.
I wasn't sure either, because not only do they not actually like make solid contact with her neck, she's breathing throughout the whole rest of the film, even though she doesn't move.
Her corpse continues breathing. When Duane finally arrives with his basket, he finds Belial grinding in a puddle of blood on the crotch of Sharon's corpse. Reportedly, the addition of the blood puddle to this scene so disgusted the crew that a handful of them walked off set here, considering the scene in bad taste. But honestly, without the puddle of blood, I might not have known she was supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I assumed that this was the setup for the sequel.
Right.
Well, I was also not entirely sure if it was her blood or his, because
I think it's definitely hers because his wound has been healed for 10 years.
Yes.
But who knows how
also,
he functions.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like up until this point, we haven't seen anything that resembles a penis on him. And like, as far as I know.
I mean, we've seen a few things that resemble penises on him, but I don't think they were supposed to be penises on his hands.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying like he was cut off and then discarded. So it's not like anybody formed one for him. And I don't think
But he had all of his
previously.
organs, supposedly. He was just malformed.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. And maybe it was just stuck on the inside. So he had to get it out.
Maybe. Duane lifts his brother up and closes him in the basket, lecturing him all the way home for killing an innocent, pure person. The argument between the brothers is enough to once again call the entire building up to Duane's room, and when he shouts at them to leave, Belial erupts from the basket and lifts Duane into the air by his balls.
This is what you used to betray me.
Yeah, the physics on this one doesn't make sense. Also, when he was killing Kutter, he like pushed her face down into the drawer.
Yeah.
So, like,
it's like, what is he pushing against?
Yeah, I was going to say, in both these moments, I don't exactly understand how he has the leverage to force a full human being, you know, up or down or wherever.
Shouldn't be possible.
It's like that scene in It's Always Sunny where Mac looks
I was thinking of that exactly. It looks so much like that scene too. There's a part where Mac just lifts Dee by her crotch like 6 feet in the air and then sets her back down. I don't even they must have used wires for that shot, but it looks amazing in the show. Next, Belial tackles Duane out the window. When the neighbors look outside, they see Belial holding on for dear life to the Hotel Broslin sign with one hand, and the other hand is gripped tightly around Duane's neck, choking him to death. Eventually, Belial's strength gives out, and the brothers fall to the sidewalk below to their apparent deaths, and the credits roll over their bodies, encircled by gawking pedestrians. The closing credits dedicate the film to exploitation director Herschel Gordon Lewis, the so-called godfather of gore. This film is technically the first in a set of 5 films in Henenlotter's filmography that are all connected by the same universe.
Right, because Casey is in all of them, right?
Right, she is in all 5. The actress is in all 5. So I'm going to go through just briefly these other films, and then we'll come back to our thoughts on this one. Between Basket Cases 1 and 2, Henenlotter released a similar film, technically in the same universe, called Brain Damage. And it starts with an older couple in a similarly dilapidated apartment building who lose track of a creature named Aylmer. He's like a blue brainworm the size and shape of a human turd, but with eyes and a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. Aylmer finds Brian, another tenant of the building, and attaches himself to Brian's brainstem, controlling him with psychoactive chemicals and piloting the man into the night to collect victims for Aylmer to kill and eat.
That sounds great.
It is great. It's actually pretty fun. In one scene, we do see Casey from this film living in the same building, and in another scene, Brian rides the subway at night and crosses paths with Duane, carrying this film's titular basket.
Oh, really?
They sit across from each other in the subway, and then Duane is freaked out by this guy, so he stands and leaves. Basket Case 2. It replays the ending of the first film, but turns up the ambulance siren to imply help is on the way, and the Bradley twins are amazingly transported to the nearest hospital. I should also mention that the design of Belial changes a lot from the first film to the second film, most notably in the arms, which are now big and buff, to the point that he now closely resembles Geodude compared to the OG Belial. The arms in the first film are stubbier, like in those head detective sketches from In Living Color. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Damon Wayans was like just a head sitting on shoes with hands sticking out
like
the sides.
like a Mr. Potato Head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before they can be taken into custody for the murders they've committed, the Bradley twins escape and are eventually tracked down by a woman named Granny Ruth, a friend of their aunt's who acts as a sort of Professor X for people with grotesque birth defects. Her name is likely a reference to that framed music sheet from the first film of Irving Berlin's Along Came Ruth, because along comes Ruth to save them. Casey, the prostitute neighbor from the first film, appears on the local news describing the Bradley twins to the press.
Did you see the creature?
I saw him. I saw him real well.
Do you know what it was?
Yeah, his brother. The little guy was Duane's brother. Do you believe that shit, man?
Belial falls in love with a female headlump named Eve, and Duane starts a relationship with Ruth's granddaughter, Susan. All the while, a reporter is tracking down the twins to bring them to justice. Now, I'm going to spoil every film in this series moving forward, so if you don't want to hear that, skip a couple minutes, but here we go. Duane tires of being cooped up with all of Ruth's freaks because there's nothing visibly wrong with him, and Belial impregnates Eve while Duane tries to talk Susan into leaving with him, only to learn that she's in the 18th trimester of a pregnancy with a mutant fetus named Bernard, capable of peeking out of her womb at will. Duane freaks out and shoves Susan backward out a second-story window to her and Bernard's death. As the rest of the freak family are still reeling from her death, Duane finds Belial in Eve's attic cage and steals him back, forcibly sewing his brother back onto his torso scar to end the film.
Hey, it's okay. We're together again.
Frankenhooker. That's the next film in the series. We start in the suburbs where Jeffrey, a crazy young inventor, talks to a functional brain with an eyeball in his laboratory. Soon after, at a birthday party barbecue, his fiancée is showing off a remote control lawnmower gift when she accidentally points it at herself and shreds herself in the yard. The dialogue repeatedly pokes fun at the girl's weight, and even the news anchors reporting the incident fire a shot.
Like wood through a mulcher, the girthful fiancée disappeared beneath the blades of the berserk mower that sent her personality raining down upon the horrified birthday revelers.
After a brief grieving period, the man stalks the hookers of Times Square in search of the perfect body to attach to his deceased wife's head before resurrecting her. But after a prostitute casting call takes an explosive turn, he ends up using parts from several women. Casey actress Beverly Bonner shows up as a guest on a talk show called Motormouth, arguing for the legalization of prostitution, again credited as Casey, connecting the film back to the rest of the Henenlotter verse. The film even ends with the same line of dialogue as Basket Case 2.
I love you, Jeffrey, and we're together again, all of us. Together again.
Basket Case 3. We start in an asylum where Duane has been confined by himself, separated yet again from his brother Belial. Presuming him cured, Granny Ruth arrives to order Duane's release, forgiving him for the deaths of her granddaughter and great-grandson. Duane boards Ruth's freak bus, and they drive out of town to see Ruth's ex-husband and estranged son, but Duane is quickly in trouble with the local police, who basically declare war on Ruth and her frightening misfits. In the midst of all this chaos, Ruth's inventor son, Little Hal, works tirelessly building a mech suit for Belial, and Belial's lover Eve is giving birth to a litter of 12 baby Belials.
Please tell me that Belial goes into the stomach of the giant mech like Krang from
Basically,
Ninja Turtles.
yes. At one point in the film, Ruth takes all the freaks to a fast food restaurant called Mighty Casey's, and the manager inside is the final canon appearance of Beverly Bonner as Casey, though credited as fast food manager this time. So that's the whole series of films. I haven't seen some of his later movies that are kind of the lesser known ones, and I don't believe that any of them are directly connected to the canon of these films.
Well, and I looked up Beverly Bonner, and apparently she directed a short.
Yes, well, we'll talk about that.
That Frank, the director is in.
Yeah, that he allowed, basically. Yeah, Basket Case is a lot of fun. I think that there's, as much as the director is dismissive and silly about it, that there's a lot of thought going into this. A lot more thought than would go into one of these cheesy horror films typically, and I really enjoyed it. It's a definite thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a big thumbs up. There was a lot to enjoy in this movie. And I watched the next two movies with
Right,
you
yeah.
because I just couldn't help myself when I walked in on this. They just, they take it a lot more campy, but it's so fun. So I just think that like these movies as a group are so great.
There's so much heart to them. And I think that it's clear that the director at least like had fun and put a lot of thought into these movies.
And they're just visually entertaining.
Yeah.
So-
The makeup effects in the second and third movie for the other freaks in Ruth's stable are really incredible. I really, really love the way all of them look.
Yeah. So I mean, this one by itself, very fun. Them as a trilogy, even more fun.
He's given us a big thumbs up.
Yeah.
They can't hear the thumbs up.
They can't hear it. I guess it's a thumbs up.
Oh
but-
my God. I was not expecting that.
But I really don't care if I ever see this movie again.
I felt like there was probably enough comedy to it that it would bring you right to the line. I wasn't sure.
It was like, what sold me was the stop motion stuff.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that was
fun.
like, okay, this is something that I have not seen before, and the cute stuff, because again, like it totally reminded me of a Boglin. Which I don't know if anyone had that toy other than a friend of mine. But when he's having like the conversation after the toilet incident and like hugging him, was like, this is kind of adorable.
Yeah.
Like, and just the nature of their relationship, and it's very like sibling-y.
I love that that's played so straightforward because they could have just made it super corny, campy the whole time, but you can tell that they actually care about each other that way. And there is the whole like the caretaker's burden part of the story with like this person who is, for all intents and purposes, able-bodied, that's being put in charge of this other person's livelihood.
Yeah.
And the toll that takes on him, like his mental health and his physical health. The problem is I feel like you probably shouldn't indulge that person when they're like, let's go murder a bunch of people. That's where you draw the line. But yeah.
But, we all have siblings, and so we've all, I assume that we've all shared
I've assumed that we've all
bedrooms.
murdered for them.
Well,
yes.
Well, we've all shared bedrooms with
Yes.
siblings.
Yes.
Yeah, growing up. Okay, yeah. So it's just like the whole concept of like, I don't want to talk right now. I just want to go to sleep.
Get out of my brain.
So yeah, I really just enjoyed that. It's like, oh, I just want to sleep, and you're being so annoying right now.
I was probably the annoying one in that conversation.
Yeah, same. I was that.
Yeah. Do we have these letterboxed yet?
Yeah.
What are we thinking, Jess?
So I have mine at a surprising 15 out of 50.
Wow. I am impressed.
Well, as like in terms of like the rewatchability, I think it has a lot of rewatchability. I think it's entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of terrible movies pretty high up on my list, and I enjoy this one more than them.
Totally.
So it is below the border and above Jaws of Satan.
So it's south of the border, you would say?
South of the border.
Richard, what are you thinking?
I have it really low, but I have it at 38, which puts it below personal best, but above Last Shark.
All right.
Is it going to
Pulling
be
the
your
trigger
number
on
one?
it
Bet? Is it going to
It's
be
not
your
number one.
Number one.
But it is number 10 out of 50. That puts it just below Porky's and just above Death Watch.
Oh, see, I thought I was high. 10.
No, I think I actually really like it.
I do think that watching the other two might have also endeared this first one to me more.
Because the second one and the
so-
third one are blatant
they're
comedies.
so absurd.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that you check them out at some point. If for nothing else than just the makeup effects on all the characters.
I also failed to mention that the Hotel Broslin sign that you see sticking off the front of the building, like I assumed, obviously that's not sticking off of a building because they're like shooting up at it, but it's probably an insert and then he's eventually hanging from it. No, it is. It's hanging off of the building and it's literally hanging. They hung it on the wall right outside of the actor playing Duane's actual apartment.
Okay.
So because they could reach it from there. And so the way that they had them hanging from it at the end was they literally pulled a truck up underneath, stood on top, like latched him up to it with a bunch of harnesses, and then drove the car away so that he could hang there and look like he was hanging from the sign. But it's actually like affixed to the building.
Wow.
A couple floors off the ground. Yeah. Pretty impressive. The editor, writer, director was Frank Henenlotter. This was his first feature, but he followed it with Brain Damage, Basket Case 2, Frankenhooker, and Basket Case 3. He's also directed a number of documentary films about exploitation cinema, including Herschel Gordon Lewis, The Godfather of Gore, and That's Sexploitation. He also edited this film, Brain Damage, and his documentaries. He's uncredited in this film as a theater patron. He's also reluctantly admitted to wearing high heels to record all the Foley of women walking in the film. He plays Belial in a couple scenes, specifically when we're looking at gloves, or for the scene where he's just a head sticking out of a hollowed-out dresser, and he rips the dial off of the TV.
Yeah.
And for one scene, the Belial gloves had shrunken to the point that they no longer fit the director, so the hands are actually being played by the 8-year-old daughter of makeup effects artist Eugis Nigels and the social worker actress and uncredited casting director Ilse Bolotis. So they were married, and their daughter performed the hands for one of the scenes while he's killing people. The music here is from Gus Russo. He has composer credits on Just This and Henenlotter's Brain Damage. The cinematographer here was Bruce Torbett. He lit this and Brain Damage for Henenlotter. He also plays Paulie in J. Michael Murrow's Street Trash. I think Murrow actually worked on this film too. This is one of the first films he worked on, and he is currently in possession of the Hotel Broslin sign too. Makeup effects were by John Caglione Jr., or John Caglione Jr. We've seen his work now in Friday the 13th Part 2 and Quest for Fire. Later this season, he's back for effects in Amityville 2, The Possession, and later still, he works on Hunger, Amityville 3D, Chud, Manhunter, Poltergeist 3, and the Blob remake. He won an Oscar for his incredible makeup work on Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy, but his most recognizable contribution to film is likely Heath Ledger's Joker makeup from The Dark Knight, which earned him a second Oscar nomination, but lost to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
It's a shame.
Yeah, but he designed that makeup. That's cool. Additional makeup effects came from Kevin Haney. So he made masks that were applied to the Belial creature in different scenes. He also worked immediately after that on Coneheads, designing all the Coneheads for the SNL sketches, not for the movie. He was also on the set of Altered States doing some of the rubbery mask effects for that film. And he does animatronics in Chud. He works on Dick Tracy with Caglione. And he also has a credit in Death Becomes Her, which is some incredible prosthetic work.
Yeah.
Kevin VanHentenryck played Duane Bradley. He's back in Brain Damage for a cameo, and then returns as Duane in the Basket Case sequels. He also provides the shrieking voice of Belial, and he posed for the face cast of the Belial puppet.
Yeah.
Because they were supposed to be twins. But that shrieking is otherworldly and terrifying, and like it gives you goosebumps the first time he starts shrieking like that. I feel like my first instinct is to laugh at it because it's so shocking, but then when it keeps going, it's very grating and it makes you start to get like psychotically terrified of it. Terri Susan Smith played Sharon. Not a lot of other credits I recognize, but I mentioned she was a singer in a punk band and shaved her head, so that's why she wore the wig. Beverly Bonner played Casey. She previously showed up in Massage Parlor Murders. After this, she's in Brain Damage. She's back as Casey in Basket Case 2 and 3 and in Frankenhooker. She worked mostly as a comedian, and in 2015, she wrote and performed her own one-act Basket Case spin-off on stage entitled Casey 30 Years Later, with Henenlotter's full blessing. From the reviews I could find, it seems to be about Casey acting as a madam to a brothel of elderly prostitutes, and she's being interviewed about her recollections of the famous Bradley twins. Robert Vogel played the hotel manager. He's back this season in Waitress. Joe Clarke played O'Donovan. He was previously Joe Shortreed in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and later in the 1986 film Nobody's Fool. Sean McCabe played young Duane. He has mostly stunt credits on titles like Death Wish 3, Aliens, Willow, Batman, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and a lot of young Indiana Jones stuff. I think he was actually Michael Keaton's double on Batman 1989. I was confused at first when I saw he was a stunt double for Mr. Bean in GoldenEye, because I thought Mr. Bean was in one of the Dalton films. Turns out he's not in a Dalton film. He's actually in Never Say Never Again, but I realized that the actor wasn't doubling Rowan Atkinson. He was doubling Mr. Bean, a.k.a. Sean Bean, who plays 006 Alec Trevelyan in the film. Ilse Bolotis played the social worker. As I mentioned before, she was also the film's uncredited casting director because she worked at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York in the registrar's office and was constantly recommending students to her friend, director Henenlotter, including her own coworker in the registrar's office, Ruth Newman, who was eventually cast as the kind aunt of the twins for the flashback sequence. Charles Stanley played a hotel tenant. His only other credit is as a used Kleenex salesman in next season's Stuck on You, not to be confused with the Farrelly Brothers movie, which actually has more in common with this film. Bruce Frankel played second detective. He has an editor credit on one episode of SNL and an additional crew credit in Rock and Roll High School. Jerry Butler played Casey Greeter number 1. He's a well-known pornographic actor who was also, at the time, married to the original Wednesday Addams actress Lisa Loring. I think that's everything for Basket Case. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, you can find all our socials at linktree/vintagevideopod. If you enjoy what we're doing, consider giving us a review on iTunes. I don't believe it helps visibility, but it's good for morale. And if you really like the show, maybe you should join our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast. What's that sound?
We got one!
That's right, it's a new patron, Brian Labuda. As a $5 patron of the show, Brian now has access to 58 full-size 70s reviews and a hand in choosing next month's film. Patrons are currently choosing between A Haunted Turkish Bathhouse, Dark Star, Eskimo Nell, Eyeball, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, Vampira, aka Old Dracula, Snuff, and TNT Jackson for a 50th anniversary review next month. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Cat People, which IMDb describes like so. A woman who was orphaned from a young age finally reunites with her older brother. Matters start to go awry when she slowly discovers the true nature of her family.